everybody, welcome to the online tutorial crochet with myself, Sylvia, at the Lantern. And this week we will be starting the basic crochet tutorial also, which is great. For those of you who have never crocheted before, this is a great opportunity to try. And I'll also be continuing with our usual crochet stitch library. So each week I'll introduce a new stitch, perhaps something that you haven't done before. So this is also a great opportunity to build on your current crochet skills. So feel free to join along, and also feel free to ask any questions after the tutorials. You can do that with text or phone or email to the Lantern, and we'll try and respond as soon as we can. So I hope you enjoy these little tutorials. Hey everybody, so today we're going to start crocheting for the beginner. So to get started, you will have a hook, and usually a 4mm hook is a good size hook to start off with, and a ball of wool, double knit wool, any double knit wool will do. This is made with acrylic and 3% metallic yarn, so you read the back of your label, and over here this is the guide for your size of the hook that you would use then to start. Okay, so this is saying a 4mm hook. And just a little tip, if you're a complete beginner and you learn as you go along, so always make a little practice square for yourself first when you're starting off, and it would be 10 centimeters. Okay, and it'll actually tell you here as well, look, if you look at this little grid, so you have a 10 by 10 centimeter square, and that would be your practice square then. Okay, that's just a little tip for you. So to get started, we work in chains in crochet. Okay, and you'll always start with a slip knot. So you can make your slip knot two different ways. I'm going to show you both, and you can decide yourself which way, so you'll be familiar with that. So you make a little loop, you bring it up behind, put your hook in and pull it up onto your hook like so, and then pull it onto it to secure it. Okay, and then you can also you could make it with your finger if you didn't want to make it with your hook. Okay, make your little loop like so, and then put your hook in and pull it. Okay, and then pull it up onto your hook for yourself. So whichever way is easier for you. And then the next thing you would do is hold your wool. So you can hold it whichever way you want starting off. So I'm right-handed, okay, so not everybody is right-handed. So just find what's ever comfortable for you, okay, starting off. I'm just going to move that out of the way there. Okay, so I like to put my wool around these two fingers and wrap it like that. Okay, so it looks like that. Okay, so I'll do that again. Wrap. Okay, and then I bring it up over the front of my hand. So that helps me then with the tension, and you'll see what I mean by that in a second. So I like to hold my work then like this with these two fingers, and this is my kind of tension finger. Some people might use their forefinger. This works for me. So again, whatever works for you. Okay, so a quick repeat. I wrap it around and I bring it up and over and I hold it. Okay, and then the next step is to create chains. Okay, so chains are used in crochet all of the time, and to create chains you're simply going to wrap the yarn around the hook, draw it through. You've created your first chain. Around, through, around, through, around, through, around, through. Okay, so they're your chains in crochet. Okay, and this is going to form the basis for most of your work. So practice with your chains. Okay, practice making your slip knot and practice making your chains, and make your chain now the length of the 10 centimeters. Okay, so you can see where I am here. Okay, so make a chain length 10 centimeters. That'll help you get started. Okay, so you've created your chains. Okay, and keep practicing. The only way that you will master any new skill or craft is by practicing. And so this is our foundation row, okay, our series of chains, and we're going to get started with a treble, what's called a treble crochet. And a treble crochet is one of the stitches, the basic stitches in learning how to crochet. And if you can master this stitch, you can crochet any other stitch, okay? So it's all practice, practice, practice. So to start off, again, hold whatever way you want to hold the wool is fine, okay, when you're starting off. So again, if you look at your hook, okay, you can see the little hook piece there. It'll always be kind of looking at you, okay, when you're starting to do your work, okay, if that's any help to you. So you bring the wool that's on the ball of yarn and you bring it up over your hook, okay, and now if you hold it like so. So we work back these chains now that we've just made, and that'll create our first row. And to do a treble crochet, as I said, yarn is up around your hook, yarn around your hook. And if you look at your chains, you can see this one is closest to the hook. We're not going to work that one. I like to skip this one when you're starting off first, okay? It just makes it easier for you to maneuver the stitches. So not the one on the hook, which is this one, not the next one, but this one. And again, if you look at it, you have a top and a bottom to that chain. So you can decide whether you want to put it in the bottom loop. And if you put it in the bottom loop, I just want to show you when you turn it over, you can see the full stitch here, okay? You're grabbing it that way. Other people like to go into the top loop for their foundation row. It's entirely up to yourself, whatever is easiest for you starting off. This is all about getting used to the hook and the wool in your hand and practicing your stitches. So I like to use the bottom. So I have my, again, go back, yarn up around your hook. I've skipped the one that's on the hook and the next one, and I'm going into the next chain. And I like to go into the bottom of it. And again, when you go into the bottom, this is what it'll look like, okay? So I'm at this stage. All you do then is you bring the wool up and around the hook again. So go back out, up and around the hook again. And it'll always be at the back of the work, your hook, when you're starting your stitches. And you draw it through the stitch that you've just gone into. And that gives you 3 loops on your hook. To finish the treble crochet stitch, we yarn around the hook again. And then we're going to draw that through the first 2 loops here. Draw it through the first 2 loops, leaving you with 2 loops. And to finish it completely, we bring the yarn up around again and draw it through the last 2 loops. And that creates your first treble crochet. Now we're going to go on to the next chain. And again, when you're starting off, the likelihood is that you are going to skip stitches. But don't worry a bit about it, okay? That's very normal starting off. So into the next one here, and a treble crochet is yarn up around your hook before you go in to the next chain. I'm going into the bottom, and be consistent now. If you're going to use the top loop, make sure you use the top loop in all of them, or if you're going to use the bottom loop, and decide yourself as well, okay? So I'm going to go back out now again and show you that one more time. Up, around, yarn around my hook, into the next chain, in it goes, and it'll come out the back, okay? Yarn up around the hook, draw it through. I have 3 loops on my hook, okay? Up, around again, yarn around my hook as it's called, and I draw that through the first 2 loops, leaving me with 2 loops left. Yarn around my hook one more time and draw it through the last 2 loops. So if you notice, we're actually doing yarn around the hook 3 times, making it a treble crochet. So you're doing kind of 3 steps, okay, if you want to take note of that. So yarn around my hook before I go into the next chain. So again, if you look closely, you're in this one already. So now this is the next one here. In we go again with the hook, just push it through and it'll come out the back of it. This is what it looks like, okay? And this, again, use this as your guide, kind of keep it looking at you. I bring my yarn around the hook, I draw it through, and I have 3 loops on my hook. second time with yarn around the hook through those 2 loops. Okay, leaving me with 2. And third and final time, yarn up, around, and I'm drawing it through those final 2 loops. And that's what it looks like. I'll do it one more time, and then all you're going to do is work all the way down to the very end, and I'll meet you there and I'll show you then how to start the next row. So one more time, yarn around my hook, into my next stitch, chain, starting off, these are chains, okay, which will make your stitch. So I've done that, I've gone in, I'm bringing the yarn up around the hook, I'm drawing it through, I have 3 loops on my hook. Second time, yarn around my hook through 2 loops. Third and final time, yarn around through those last 2. This is what my treble crochet is starting to look like. So continue that and I'll start you off on the next row. So here we are at the end of our foundation row, and I have 1 chain left. This is the very first chain we made starting off, and I just wanted to show you. Make sure you don't forget that, okay? So again, yarn around the hook, into the chain. Now don't get confused with the tail here, okay? This is where this is our starting slip knot tail. So hold on to it. So yarn around through the chain. I have 3 loops, yarn around through 2, yarn around through 2. So this is your very first crochet row of trebles. And for crochet, when we're turning our work to work back, we will always create what's called a turning chain, okay? Especially when you're starting off now as a complete beginner, it's important that you practice your turning chains. And for a treble crochet, it's recommended that you chain up 3. And we've chained up already. You've learned to make chains. So to make a chain, it's just through, around, and through. So that's 2, around, and 3. Now, the turning chain helps you to create a new row each time. So it's all about creating the height at the start of each row, which will be equivalent to the stitches you'll be making, if that makes sense. So this is a treble crochet stitch, and if you look at these 3 chains here, it pretty much looks like the same height as a treble stitch, and that will help you keep your rows even, keep your work even as you're working along. And again, this is our practice square starting off, so don't worry if it starts going in and out and you've added stitches and you've missed stitches. It's all about practice, getting a feel for the wool and the hook in your hand and creating your chains and just practicing your treble crochet stitch. So now you've made your first turning chain. So we've created the 3 chains, and now we're going to turn our work, and we're going to work back again on the row to create our second row. So again, there's your first treble crochet, but you've made it with 3 chains. That's what the turning chain does, makes the first stitch of the next row. And now we're going to make a treble, yarn around your hook. Now look closely. You don't work down into the base here. If you did, you will be increasing your work. You will always skip the base stitch here and you work into the next one, no matter what crochet stitch you're doing. And again, there'll be different teaching and methods on crochet, but this is how I was taught, so I'm just going to continue sharing what I was taught starting off, okay? So if you look at that there now, so the 3 chain looks about the same height as our treble crochet, and that's the purpose of the turning chain. Off we go again, yarn around. Now, if you look at the top, you can count your stitches now clearly. This is what the top of the stitch looks like, okay? And we're working in to our stitch. And we're drawing through a loop, like we did in the previous row, yarn around through 2, yarn around through 2. Start the next one, yarn around, hold out your work if you're not sure where you should be going, okay? Look down on the stitches if you're not sure where you should be putting it. So you see you have a back loop and you have a front loop, but we want to get into the stitch, so we're going in here, like so. And if you see again, the hook is still looking at me. I draw a yarn around my hook, I draw it through that stitch, I have 3 loops. Yarn around my hook, second time through the first 2, yarn around third time and final time through the last 2, I've finished another treble crochet. That's what it's starting to look like. I'll do one more and then you can work along yourself to the end, and I'll do one more turning chain just to show you, and then you just practice after that, okay? So off we go again into the next one. Yarn around my hook before I go in for the treble crochet. I'm going in here. That's what it looks like at the top. Okay, my hook has gone into the stitch. Yarn around my hook, draw it through 3 loops on my hook. Yarn around a second time through the first 2. Yarn around for the third and last time, finish the treble crochet. And that's what it's starting to look like. So as I say now, continue on all the way down to the end, and I'll meet you there. We'll make another turning chain and start off again. And after that, then it's just about practicing your treble crochet stitch. Now we've come down to the end there. So if I take the stitch out of the last one there so I can show you exactly what to do at the end. So down to the last stitch, yarn around my hook, in I go. Yarn around my hook, through 2, yarn around my hook, through 2. Now if you look closely, okay, this was the very first row that we did. And this looks like the last stitch here. But if you actually open out your work, this space here was the very first treble that we created in the very first row. So be sure not to miss that. Do not worry if you do. It's very normal starting off to always miss the last stitch at the end of the row. Very, very normal. So don't be at all concerned. But I just want to show you starting off when you're starting to learn to crochet, to try and avoid missing the last stitch, okay? If you do, you can actually see it there. If I hold that closer, already it looks as if there's a little dip in here, and that's what happens when we miss the last stitch in the crochet. Our work doesn't maintain the straight line that we like to get in crochet. So don't miss the last stitch with your treble again. And if you're having trouble finding it, just like you can see that you're in this stitch, open out your work. Separate the stitches, the last 2 stitches. That's one, and you know you have to get in here. Okay, so in you go. Okay, and it might be a little bit fiddly, but persevere. Again, it's not working for me, so I'm just going to go in. Okay, and you've gotten into the top of the stitch. Okay, and now you're going to finish that treble. Yarn around your hook, through the 2 loops, like so. Yarn around your hook, through the 2 loops. It's wanting to do its own thing. No. So this is what it looks like. And again, our turning chain for our next row, you'll always do your turning chain before you start a new row in crochet. I'm just going to hold out the work there. This is what it looks like. And count your stitches also as well. That's another tip. Count your stitches at the end of each row when you're starting off, just to make sure that you have the same amount every time. And if you have too many, you know you've probably crocheted into 1 stitch 2 times. And if you have less than what you started off with, you know you're after missing a stitch somewhere along. But again, do not worry about that. That's very normal. Chain up our 3, 1, 2, 3. We'll hold it out there so you can see. That's going to act as our first treble crochet in our new row. Turn your work. Okay, hold it up. Start again the next row, yarn around your hook. Remember, we're not going to work into the base of this. So if you hold it out, if I hold it that way, you can see 1, 2, 3. We're not going to work in here. we're going to work into this one. So turn it back. So you won't be working in here, you'll be working in here. In we go. Yarn around your hook, 3 loops, yarn around your hook through 2, yarn around your hook through the last 2. And now we are starting off on our 3rd row. Yarn around your hook into the next stitch. This is what the top of the stitch looks like. Draw through your wool, 3 loops, yarn around through 2, yarn around through the last 2. This is what it's starting to look like. I'll do that 2 more times and then you can continue on to the end. Yarn around your hook into my stitch. Okay, that's what it looks like looking down on it. Yarn around my hook, 3 loops, yarn around through 2, yarn around through 2. Okay, this is what it's starting to look like so. Yarn around my hook, just open out my wool there. Okay, so now yarn around, find my next stitch, and again, if you're not sure which stitch to go into, open out the stitches to identify it. Okay, so you can see when I open that out there, you can see the hole visibly, you know, and that's the top of the hook looking down on the stitch. Again, if I take that out and I look down, you should be able to count your stitches looking down on it. And if you open it out this way, you can also count your stitches individually working along this way. Yarn around through the loops, my stitch even, draw through the loop. I have 3 loops. Yarn around through 2, yarn around through 2. And that's all you're going to do. You're going to work along to the very end, okay? And I'll meet you here for one final time, and you can see clearly then how to finish off the row there, because the previous row, if you remember, we did our 3 turning chains, and it's important that you go into the top of that because that acts as a stitch. Do not forget that, because that's where you'll start going wrong and your work will start going in if you start missing it. So I'll meet you there for one final time, and then you can just continue practicing your treble crochet. Now we're at the end of that row, and as I mentioned earlier, it's important that you don't forget to treble into that turning chain at the end. That turning chain, remember, always acts as our first stitch in each new row. Okay, it helps keep our work straight. So you have to go into the top of this 1, 2, 3 with a treble crochet, around, yarn around through 2, yarn around through 2. Okay, and it just helps to keep our work straight again. And this is what it's looking like. So all you do now is you just continue practicing that and make your practice square, your 10 centimeter by 10 centimeter practice square. It doesn't have to be 10 centimeters, that's just a guide. They usually give you that on the label that comes with the wool. It'll also help you with your tension as well with your work. So when you're starting off, you might get a perfect square first time, and that's absolutely fantastic. If not, just keep on trying. Don't give up. Learn a new skill this time round for yourself, okay? So keep going with that, ladies, and I will meet you next time for another new stitch to add to your library for your beginner's crochet class. Have fun!